and we are going to be looking at intervention funds. Now, in over 50 years, the Nigerian government has identified a number of resource allocation priorities as essential to national development.
These priorities have also influenced the establishment of agencies to manage resources that can drive areas of the economy that will determine national development.
These resources have been focused on the areas of petroleum industry development, educational development, textile development, automotive industry development, pharmaceutical industry development, and many, many more.
Unfortunately, as funds are collected from industry operators for the development of these sectors, there has been neither accountability nor the visible impact of the efforts by the government.
These have led to arguments that these agencies and specialized funds are only established to service political interests. So this Wednesday we focus on these development funds and agencies and raise the questions as to how well they have assisted national development or how they have been rendered as instruments for funding corruption in Nigeria. We have with us in the studio Dr. Emeka Okengwu, project developer and management consultant. You're welcome, sir, again.
Mr. Emeka, it's nice to have you join us this morning on the African Voice. All right, you heard our interest. I'll just quickly read out some of these intervention funds to you. Now, the universities and polytechnics got 95 billion naira intervention fund. The aviation sector, 86.7 billion intervention funds. With, of course, Air Nigeria leading with 35.5 billion naira, followed by Aero, 20 billion naira. Nollywood got $200 million intervention funds, 200 billion naira. Pharmaceutical intervention funds. I don't know, but I don't see any impact of these funds in these sectors.
Thank you very much, Tsunami. I think you've also missed out two very important funds. You've missed out the shore funds and you've missed out the PTF.
Yes, PTF.
Okay, first and foremost, let's, I think that the definitions are already in the answers or in the questions. When you use the word intervention, it means, you know, there's a lacuna. There's something you want to deal with. There's something, there's a shortfall you need, you know, to bridge. Having said that, you also missed out another very, you know, important aspect of this intervention, which is the human capital.
Yes.
Okay, because you see, when you're talking about intervention programs, you've also missed out the basic foundations. Why are we intervening? You know, because when you wake up in the morning and you decide that the textile subsector needs intervention funds, and then you begin to now focus on what you call the front end of the textile industry, without actually now looking at what are the trends. You know, are we still doing cotton? What are what about the gineries? What about the, you know, what you might call your upstream? You know, what about your cotton farms? What about your polyamers? What about your polyesters? What's the new thing now? What's the new deal? And then all of a sudden, you are not also understanding that probably what you're throwing money into is something that has become technically moribund. What you're going to be getting is what they call dead on arrival. And I think that's the case of the textile industry. But let's move away from the textile industry and probably go away or go to the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm going to take a very, you know, important angle to that, you know, perspective. A lot of people do not realize, I mean, everybody talks about vaccine, and that the federal government has a vaccine laboratory, you know, that is supposed to be state-of-the-art.
Vaccine or vaccine?
Vaccines.
Okay.
And you know the very funny aspect of these vaccines, a lot of, you know, these vaccines are made out of, you know, eggs, chicken eggs. It's a wow, huh? Okay?
Yeah.
Yes. And we are busy, you know, spending $100 million or more, you know, bringing in these vaccines and then paying more when the vaccines, you know, get off the shelf from those who originally, you know, produced it or invented it to deal with a scourge. And then you throw, what do they call it now, intervention funds at the pharmaceutical sector. Yet, you do not have, in the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology, you have about 30 agencies, you know, that are supposed to be research agencies. I understand there are moves to even scrap, you know, or merge a lot of these agencies. But what's germane, what's up is that a lot of these agencies are critically underfunded.
Okay.
So when you do not, we are talking about the upstream now, before you now start talking about what can happen downstream. Okay? You now look at the Shore program, which is very, very recent.
The Shopee.
Yeah, the Shopee. You know, nobody, when the Shopee came, it was the same infrastructure. We intervened here,
Yes.
we intervened there. You know, I think what has happened to us in this country is that we've gotten very used to, you know, shouting mantras that we truly do not think through. Less than 6 years ago, I mean, you couldn't see any government memo that didn't start with 7-point agenda.
Definitely.
You didn't go to any public function that didn't start with 7-point agenda. Everything was a 7-point agenda, but nobody could define what the agenda was. There was no blueprint for that agenda. So when you now start throwing intervention funds or intervention programs against this thing that truly is just some political mantra, then you begin to throw things into what you call bottomless pits. You know, the white man calls it pissing money down the gutter. Are you listening to me, ladies?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and then you take it from another perspective. These days now, the first thing you hear in every public function is, even in the military, I mean, transformation agenda. And then based on this agenda, we'll now also start throwing intervention funds in all areas. But the critical element here we should be able to ask ourselves is, the people who are dealing or doing this, do they understand? I think it was in the Bible that they asked a man who was reading, do you understand what you are reading?
Okay, Doctor, I'll hold you on that frame of thought. Now, unfortunately, it took the crash of Dana Airlines and the loss of lives for a lot of the irregularities and, of course, revolving around the 300 billion naira intervention fund provided by the federal government for the aviation, which was supposed to be domiciled in the Bank of Industry, to come to the fore. Now, you look at such occurrences and you wonder, what were the structures of management set up to be able to supervise these funds, and so that it could get to the right hands and be used for what they were supposed to be used for?
I'm quite glad you mentioned the Aviation Center, because it's an interesting one, and I think it can be able to clearly show, you know, where we have these very huge lacunas. You see, our aviation sector, I'd mentioned this in passing in one of my talks here with you. You know, right now is made of basically what you can call aesthetics, which is fine. But for you to be able to support this aesthetics, you know, beautiful airports, you want to walk into South Africa and you're like, wow, can I lie down here for a minute? But something supports it, and the thing that supports it is what they call MRO. MRO means maintenance, repairs, and overhaul. The moment you do not have that infrastructure for MRO, because in the airline industry, there are what they call A to D to E checks. Most of these checks are what they call gate checks. I think the A, B are done at the gates. The C, you know, is where you now start talking about what you call, you know, your performance, your depot performance maintenance, or what they call PDMs for the military, or MRO for civil aviation. Now, in this country, apart from the one that Akwa Ibom State government is trying to put together, and I understand it has a lot of challenges, you know, from the relevant authorities. Is it not instructive? Is it not strange that we spend so much money putting these airports, international standard, glittering lights et al., and we don't have what can support the work of FAN or NACA or whatever, you know, regulatory agency? So the crash of Dana, coming back to your question, it didn't take the crash of Dana. Dana is just one out of a many. For every aircraft that has crashed, it's brought us out. For everyone that has crashed. I mean, the last time, I think the ones that wanted to collide, and then it was Sosoliso or something. The other one was cattle on the wrong way. You know, the other one was... you know, what helped me about the Dana Airlines is that somehow, you know, I'm not an aviation expert, okay? I tried to dig and read into what could make engines collapse. All of a sudden, The experts are telling you that it was engine collapse. The other ones are telling you that it was something. And then it brings us to something that is also very instructive. And I tell you what it is. There's no difference, or very little difference, between what you call your DPK and your Jet A1 fuel.
I did mention earlier that Air Nigeria was the lead beneficiary in the intervention fund for the aviation sector with 35.5 billion naira, and followed by Aero that got 20 billion naira. Now, because I'm wondering, recently I know that Air Nigeria has not been operating. I noticed because I was going to Lagos, and then I got a message that both my flights scheduled a week before were cancelled, and since then up till now nothing has been heard of Air Nigeria. And then you wonder, 35 billion intervention fund, what is that particular airline, for instance, doing with that fund, and what is the sector managers doing to make sure that funds are properly utilized? Okay, you see, the
aviation industry is a global industry. So can we also do one little thing here? So we can pigeonhole it properly. Can we divide 35 billion by 160 naira so we can know how much money we're talking about? Okay, because you see, where you hear 35 billion, you know, the man in the streets, it probably wouldn't, if you're not very careful, do what's proper for that airline. I think what's critical, I think what must be understood is that we are throwing money with our programs. We're not thinking our projects through. So if you throw in $350 billion, it will still go the same way 35 naira will go if you don't plan it through or think it through. The critical factors, like I mentioned earlier, is that there are two things to this whole talk. One is a human capital, or what you call your human capacity, that's able to understand, that's able to develop a framework or a plan that can now take funding. Two is the infrastructure that can now be able to now support this human capital to be able to now make certain that this fund is well utilized.
Okay.
Three is that we are now juxtaposing these two critical factors, and we're now doing a lot of the things we do for what you call dividends of democracy. And the moment, you know, money is not something you wake up and you want to spend. You know, it likes to be spent.
It is meant to be spent.
If you walk into a shop now, trust me, you need to tell yourself, I've got other problems. Or you're going, because you go from one shelf to the other shelf. So if you're not able to pigeonhole, if you're not able to go with a list, a shopping list, you're going to end up, you know, running yourself, you know, out of a bundle. So what I'm trying to say is that everything you've mentioned here has failed critically because of one factor. What can my government or administration do to help this sector?
President of NASIMA, Herbert Ajayi, says there's going to be a round table for all the stakeholders and regulators to review the impact of the intervention funds, you know, so far that has been given to some of these sectors. Now, when we talk about intervention funds and money missing hands, then we talk about corruption. A lot of the time, people are of the opinion that this money is catered away for campaigns and for political agendas. Now, this brings me back to my question again. What about the management procedures and the supervisory bodies who are supposed to be in charge of these funds?
You know, I had gotten on a program and I said to them, if you want to solve the problem of a fuel subsidy, there are two things that will happen. Either the NNPC is suing, the one suing is contractors, or the NNPC and the contractors are in the dock.
That's the only way.
That's the only way. Let me come back to this. This roundtable is also very diversionary. What you need to do, like, you know, my brother here has said, is that there are caveats. And the roundtable does not have the authority to discuss those caveats. And probably the people who will come to that roundtable will come there to they give you 5 minutes to talk. I mean, you've gone to roundtables before. They give you, and before they take 90 minutes introducing people in the high table and recognizing, and then 10 minutes, and by the time 1 or 2 persons asks 1 or 2 questions, it's over. You don't need a round table to find out what went wrong. What you need is to look at the caveats or look at the conditions of that loan. And then, like I said, do you have a program, what you call a PPA, a planned program of action, where probably it is matrixed? Yes. This happens at this level and these monies are released. This happens, when the World Bank comes and they give you funding, 80% of the times they come with missions or what they call, tax teams. Now, so when you now come to discuss this roundtable, and we've had a maritime roundtable, and by the end of the day, what happened? Oh, we are losing 300 billion to oil theft, and we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and there's a communique. That's what comes out of roundtables. Communiques, and communiques are not instruments of law. They can be used against anybody in a law court. What it is you need to do is that if you want to investigate what had happened to the fund, you set up a judicial panel of inquiry. That's what you need, not a round table. So whatever Naseni says or what they're going to do is a tea party as far as I'm concerned.
That's where the corruption comes in. Even the judicial panel of inquiry, will it yield any result? You
see, the truth of the matter, again, is, like I said to you, we started by saying, can we be able to now differentiate the 7-point agenda transformation to something that calls an economic development program?
Yes.
Okay? Now, first and foremost, if you are talking about stakeholders or how do we now solve this problem of corruption, you must first and foremost deal. Okay, let me digress a little because this might make some sense here. We're all directors in the federal service. I read political science, he read economics, he read history, she read medical sciences. And then all of it, there's a posting. And they're posting Sinami to Ministry of Mines as Director of Planning, Research and Statistics. They're posting you to Ministry of Health as probably Director, whatever. They're posting him to another agency as Director, and then by the time he goes there, he takes over and he begins to issue directives and instructions. There's no training, there's no education, there is no, so until you understand that corruption, people are not corrupt because they want to be corrupt. Okay, by nature, man is, if you want to use the word, animalistic. And that's why you must be able to put some control measures and then insist on superintending these control measures. If you don't put them in, it's the story of what are not taking its course comes to play. So when you want to talk about tackling corruption, I think that the first thing we need to do is to look at our values.
All right.
You must initiate it.
A lot of people will say that it's lamentable that the federal government's response to, some will call it our self-inflicted domestic crisis, has not been yielding any results. We talk of poverty. I'm sure you read the story of the young boy that was killed and put in a traveling bag by a man who was supposedly taking him for a ritual killing. What will cause a man to see a 3-year-old child and kill him in cold blood? Now, let's move away from that because that is actually a very sensitive issue. The Senate Committee on Public Accounts and Minerals, I think sometime in July, discovered that 44 billion naira was missing from the federal government's special intervention funds on solid minerals. Now, they also discovered that the massive discrepancies where they found that the money was, when they found the money was gone, however, was spent on loans to the Federal Ministry of Water and, of course, used to disburse to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the purchase of chancery. This is for solid minerals. And yet, we have lead poisoning in Zamfara State. And they are crying wolf that there is no money to actually deal with the matter. And we are talking about intervention funds. Now, this brings me to the question, structure. Are there any structures categorically set aside for these intervention funds and the bodies and the agencies they're running so that the agencies that need the money, the people that need the money, get the money that is stipulated for that community or for that problem? Because you look at intervention funds and solid minerals and you look at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are two distant cousins.
If you had asked me, if you knew me any better and asked me this question, like somebody had asked you to, I was in the National Technical Working Group of this from 2020, and I was in the Solid Minerals Thematic Group.
Okay.
I was an external consultant to the Ministry of Solid Minerals when they were looking at the technical audits of Ajokuta and Nyomko. I've just finished a study for the Canadian International Development Association on the mining sector in Nigeria. And I run the oldest mining company in Nigeria. It's about 68 years old.
Wow.
You see, the mining sector is as sensitive as that baby in that bag, because I was listening to you this morning when you were talking about it, and I could see it was not emotional for you. It was a mixture of everything. And you were representing the mind of every Nigerian who has a soul. But let's get to the question, because the solid minerals thing, if I get in here now, you need to extend this thing. Okay? Because that's an area I am very, very, very passionate about. So much so that in 2006, I was invited by the World Bank. I was in the World Bank headquarters to talk about the solid mineral sector. Okay? But let me get to your question. First and foremost, you're not talking about 40 billion. That fund was 400 billion. It's called the Natural Resources Development Fund. It wasn't 40 billion.
44.
What had happened was that during the time of the Yar'Adua administration, I think the Minister of Agriculture then had written a memo and gotten approval, for that money to be used for some agriculture thing or something. I don't have the full details, but I think that's how the gist, went. And so far, between the Yar'Adua administration and the Jonathan administration, some of the money from that fund was even used to pay, I think, a construction company. The list is endless. But let me tell you what the problem of solid minerals is. There are two major problems. One is, like you said, structural, and the other one is operational. But let's look at the operational problems of solid minerals. In 1971, the federal government set up what they call the Nigerian Mining Corporation. And the essence of establishing the Nigerian Mining Corporation was for government to be able to now establish something that looked like the NNPC, that could interface with the private sector, get into deals, do exploration, and take it all the way to exploitation and beneficiation, go into joint ventures. One of the ministers came in and scrapped the mining corporation, and had written to her then to say, scrapping this corporation will mean that by law you do not have any institution that can be able to carry out any investments in the mining sector. Now, what we have left in that sector, in fact, you can break the mining sector into three broad sectors. What you call your commercial operations, what you might call your regulatory, and what you might call your capacity building. Under the commercial operations, that's where you have Ajokuta Steel, Delta Steel, Inland Rolling Mills, Nigerian Coal Corporation, Nigerian Mining Corporation, and all that. Can I give you news?
Please do.
The only institution in that commercial operation standing now is the one they call artisanal and small-scale mining. NCC is scrapped. NMC is scrapped. Inland mills are sold. Oshobo, Jos, and the other one. Ajokuta is not working. And then that brings me, like I said to you, it's an area we need to talk about some more, because I can also tell you what the issues of Ajokuta is. But to answer your question very slowly and very simply, there is only one thing you need to be able to unlock the solid minerals or natural resources subsector, and it is called data. But for the solid minerals, it is not the data that the present Nigerian Geological Survey Agency is generating, because by law, the information they are generating is what is called basic geosciences data. That might be able to form an investment interest. It will not form a business interest. What's the difference? The difference is that, okay, fine, you have done these, your little things, there's a rock here that shows that one or two other things might be able to happen. But until you're able to take that information to where you now call bankable feasibility studies or core drilling in mining, you are not going to be getting investments. And right now, I stand to be corrected and challenged. There is no agency in this country that can take any mineral development process beyond scientific studies, which is what you call tabletop data. This is also the major issue with a lot of our intervention programs. Because before you throw in money into what you call a project, you must have done what they call pre-feasibility, feasibility, post-feasibility, and bankable feasibility. That's what now gives you the framework that shows you human needs, which is human capital, equipment needs of our project, and the financing needs.
At this point, what would you advise? Because again, throwing money at the problems obviously isn't solving it. Dr.
Ma'am, if you create a framework that makes it impossible for you to even throw the money, so the money walks in, the first thing that the Senate should do is to set up laws. The moment you create the laws that says for you to be able to get intervention funds, there has to be a feasibility and a bankable feasibility study. There has to be people who are going to be accountable for this money. Right now in the banks, what are they doing? You can give a loan to somebody, but we'll hold you accountable. When a loan fails, they suspend you from the bank. When you get it back, okay, fine, it's possible you could get your work back. So if you create these systems where by a stroke of a biro, which is what I keep talking about, impunity, somebody, the same Senate clears you, gives you DG, gives you a check, you can write that check, and they then let you spend this money, and then by the end of the day, somebody writes a petition and they drag you back to come and explain. That's not how it works. You must be able to first and foremost institute the frameworks that makes it impossible for you to walk in and walk out. And then we're talking about you're stealing this thing. That is one. But I think what is most important is first and foremost finding out why we need to even intervene in the first place. Because if you don't find out why we need these intervention funds, okay, then you must be able to now look at the parent body. Like I keep saying, the transitional agenda of President Jonathan has put him on the spotlight. Because the truth of the matter is that the expectations now coming from a transitional agenda is actually what he now begins to see as criticisms, against his government. What we think, what people thought that was going to be happening now, where we're going to be looking at our institutions, a lot of these agencies were set up as conduits. A lot of people know this. Yeah. A lot of them were set up as, people just passing money and money goes through the
patronage.
Simple. So if you're not able to now first and foremost say you're transforming your, the whole setup, you must look at these agencies that now spend your money as a beginning point. Do you understand? It is from the parent agencies that you get the agency. Because, you see a ministry telling you, oh, we don't have money, we only have 3 billion. But look at the agencies around that ministry. You have about 300 and something billion. And DGs are taking these things to minister, and the man is saying, approved, release, and money is going. So if you're not able to now institute proper, legal, thought through, think through, thought well, planned program of actions that define roles clearly for all the actors, we'll keep having more of investigative panels. And then by the end of the day, those in support say, aye, the ayes have it. And that's what will keep happening.
Meanwhile, they have no plan for how to spend
how
the
to do
money.
that, of
so
course.
you may begin to wonder, should then the federal government hold on to its intervention funds until there is a roadmap of success in place?
No, madam. Let's do the proper things. Let's do the right things. I happen to know about the UBEC program too, and UBEC is just an afterthought of an intervention program when it was called MPEC. It started as what they call the National Primary Education Commission, that was partly World Bank funded. But I think the story of our country...
Dr. Emeka, you have to just...
Yes, madam, is please let us build the proper structures.
Okay,
all right.
That's a solution.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Let us build the proper structures. That is what Dr. Emeka Okengwu has said, project developer and management consultant. Thank you for coming to Kakaki this morning. We've been talking about intervention funds and, of course, between development and corruption.